Thank you all for joining. We've got 40 minutes here, so we're not going to bore you to death. I think it's going to be pretty action-packed. We're going to be talking about working from anywhere and the evolution of culture and talent. So without further ado, Rob, Naveed, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Amir. Good to see you again. Welcome, everybody, and welcome, Naveed. Again, I'm Rob Strickland. Yeah, great. Rob Strickland here. Get to moderate yet another great conversation with RingCentral. Super happy about that. And coming into, not from any coast, middle of the country here, very warm, still Austin, Texas. And Naveed, we've got treasure trove of things to talk about today. As you know, I've spent about 3 decades as a CIO or CTO, and certainly in the telecom world. And this is a topic near and dear to my heart. So I've got a whole bunch of questions and some things just to rifle off to you. But first, just how about a little introduction for the studio audience, for yourself, and a little bit about your background. I know you've had an incredible journey to get to where you are today. So I'd like to hear a little bit about that, and then just give us a little color on RingCentral.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much, Rob. Thank you for having me here. And thank you for sparing time, everyone, for joining us and listening to us to talk about how we see the world. Now, of course, this is obviously our opinion of the world and what we're seeing. A little background on me. I spent about 11 years in the United Nations Department of Peacekeeping Operations, served as CIO for 10 years at CUNY, and then 4 years at Columbia University Teachers College. And now I'm at RingCentral running their vertical industry practice, where I have a group of CIOs from separate industries: education, healthcare, retail, government, and financial services, reporting into me so that RingCentral can be focused on industry challenges and know the industry trends. So when we go to help solve customer issues, we're speaking to the customer from that perspective and actually solving those issues rather than trying to sell widgets. So that's a little bit about me. I hope that helps. A little bit about RingCentral. RingCentral is a unified communication and collaboration platform. That means we cover video, voice, and messaging services. We also have a contact center solution, which integrates completely into a single solution, giving a unified experience to our customer base. And that's kind of how I have implemented RingCentral at Columbia and Columbia University, and we're implementing it at Cornell and other universities. And that's how I got to RingCentral as an industry leader. Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that intro. Super helpful. So just to start off kind of a topic, I guess, that's sort of near to everybody. We've had this kind of push and pulls, a couple of vectors on what's happening with the economy. We kind of had this, like, maybe a little bit of recession, inflation kind of nicking at our heels, but then also coupled with that, we have this notion about the Great Resignation and people kind of moving about. Certainly here in Texas, I was headed to the airport the other day and I saw gas actually under $3 a gallon. Ooh. So it was like $2.95-ish, and then I made my way out to California, and it was certainly, well above that.
$6.
Certainly around $6. So, we have the pressures and pulls of some people going back to work, this hybrid workforce. We've got the Great Resignation, people kind of working from anywhere. But, we have, this sort of some of these tidal changes. How do you unpack that a little bit for us, and maybe the way you see, like, the unified communication stack, being an enabler or an empowerment, of company strategy around those kind of vectors?
Yeah, so let's take a step back a little bit pre-COVID, then talk about a little bit of COVID and what we're seeing today, right? So pre-COVID, folks went to unified communication and collaboration in the cloud, specifically to avoid things like disaster, right? Business continuity and disaster recovery was where people, whoops, did we lose somebody?
No, John came. We're putting back on you. Keep going.
Okay, there we go. All right. Yeah. So what happened is that companies were moving to the cloud to assure business continuity and have a strategy against disasters, right? And going to a real cloud solution like RingCentral, because it's based on microservices and Kubernetes and its ability to expand, similar to what Google does, right? was a tremendous game changer for expansion, growth, scalability, and continuity, right?
Mhm.
From a CIO perspective. Then what happened is that during that time we had adoption challenges, right? People had Zoom or some other solution, Microsoft Teams, et cetera, et cetera. So what happened is that we had this adoption challenges, right? Where people were like, oh, I don't want to use video. I don't want to turn on video. I don't want to do this, that, the other thing. I want to use this specific product, not that specific product. But when COVID happened, digital transformation happened overnight, right? No
Mhm.
training, no setup, right? And now we've been through this phase for 3 years. What
Mhm.
happened is people got used to working in a in an away from office environment, work from home, work from my cabin up in Maine, my ski lodge, my home in Paris, wherever. And the cool part was that we could hire anyone from anywhere,
Yeah.
right? Like that was a game changer for a government because government required butts and seats 9 to 5, right? They had all these labor contracts and things, and they realized they could manage these labor contracts through software,
Yeah.
right? And they could continue productivity and attract talent from anywhere because now we could get diverse talent, diverse thought, and diverse geographies involved in solving some of our problems. Actually, we saw productivity rise during COVID. And, we used to talk about work-life balance, right? And Ariana Huffington changed it. She said it isn't work-life balance. She said it's work-life integration. And honestly, that's what's happened, right?
Yeah.
We didn't realize where the border was between our work life and having dinner at home with our wife and kids and partners, right? Um, so we adapted, we've changed, and one of the things that has happened in this scenario is that we've adapted to this new environment where we've realized that working remotely out of the office is just as powerful as working within the office. What we lost though, and this had a huge emotional impact. Actually, if you look at the New York Times article from yesterday, actually, uh, anxiety is up 25% amongst groups under the age of 50 years old.
Mhm.
And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're working from home and working remotely, or they're isolated from loved ones or friends or colleagues, right? That we kind of find an outlet at the cooler, right? You, like Rob, I could come up to you in the office and say, hey, did you hear what Schmedley said? That's absolutely insane. I can't believe that Schmedley wants to do this,
Yeah.
right? And then you'd let off that steam and we'd be done. We'd have a cup of coffee, glass of water, talk about sports or whatever, our dog, Caroline, whatever,
Mhm.
and then be off, right? And we'd have that exchange. You miss that when you're away from the office.
Yeah.
So now what we've realized, and a lot of the CEOs, like Citibank CEO and our CEO even have engaged in return to office, right? But there's a challenge now. The challenge is a lot of people were hired during COVID and
Mhm.
they adapted their lives around their children, their families, and couple that with all of the challenges that we're having with the Ukraine war, the cost of energy, inflation is up 8%. We're headed into a recession, or we've hit a recession. And as a matter of fact, yesterday the Hang Seng market on Bloomberg uh, um, um, identified the market in the Hang Seng market as a true bull market. It dropped 20%.
Wow.
So that drop is having an impact on on finances and creating all of these variables. So now navigating through this and finding a balance, that's the hard part for us leaders, right? And long story short, it's having an impact on resignations and retention and things like that. Companies who are able to find that balance are able to retain their employees, and using these tools strategically like we are today with the webinar and remote work and doing, sporadic meetings across geographies and maintaining geographic diversity in our employment base and balancing all of that thoughtfully is a new challenge for the next 3 to 5 years, because we don't know how it's going to all pan out, but
Yeah, it's
we're
still
going to have to figure it out together as a society, right?
Yeah, still formulating. It's interesting too, because I think it would be interesting just to have people put in the chat how many openings they currently have in their own like tech teams, because my sense is, just traveling around, in light of everything you said, which I think is 100% accurate, there's still all these open jobs, right? And people are still,
exactly.
We still have this problem, like where do we find talent, right? If you allow me, like there's a couple things you touched on that I think are super interesting. If you think about now, let's say a little over 2.5 years when we entered in the pandemic, people just made use of what they had for whatever video or whatever conferencing, right? And we kind of shoehorned it in and wedged it in. And there were a lot of those companies that emerged that was sort of right time, right place, but maybe not as feature rich or as capable, right? But they were there, right? And so now kind of that 2-year cycle, you think about a roadmap and you think about a couple things that, again, as a former CIO myself, there's 3 things that I think are super important for whatever UC stack I would have: security, like integration, right? Some of the things I know that people bring up a lot, like integration with Teams, for example, integration APIs, and availability. And you mentioned it earlier, like RingCentral has always been built in the cloud and 5 nines. The reason why I was a customer for years, especially in the contact center space. How can you give us a little bit of glimpse, if you will? How does that roadmap, now that 2 years is kind of gone through, and you're taking really that leadership position, and the backdrop of what you just said about what's happening, in the industry, right? And I think that roadmap, and maybe there's one other leg of the stool that I have neglected to talk about. Those are 3 in my mind that are super important anyway. So what are your thoughts around kind of that 3-legged stool and that progression, if you will, of the roadmap?
No, you're right on, right? So I would add one more, is cost rationalization, right? Because people went out and bought a whole bunch of other stuff, right? And now they have this enterprise architecture with this UC tool, this video tool, this voice tool, this contact center tool, this this CRM, this email system, and another whatever, right? And it's not like getting a free browser from Google Chrome and saying, okay, I got Google Chrome and I got Firefox and I'm good to go, giddy up. What you're doing now is you've added complexity to your enterprise, because like you said, you scrambled to meet the needs of that moment. Now we're past that moment. There are a couple of things to consider, right? You want to think about a frictionless environment. You want to think about scalability. You want to think about cost rationalization. You want to think about reliability and security, because the more data sprawl you have across multiple applications, the more risk you're bringing into your enterprise architecture, right?
Mm-hmm.
And more risk of phishing, more suspected robocalls, all sorts of like fun stuff that you can bring into the environment. That today's CIO better have a CISO certification, because God, there's you should be fired if you don't take care of some of the basic stuff, right? And that's a challenge. So how do you do this? You do this by being thoughtful about your environment, thinking about the adoption across your enterprise, thinking about coexistence. Like, okay, for example, you might have teams across your entire enterprise. A lot of industries have adopted teams for messaging and things like that. Well, RingCentral says, don't take out teams, make it better by adding RingCentral Voice to its integration, right? So that's where, like, we're talking about integration. I always see, platforms like the UC cloud-based platforms like RingCentral as truly platforms for integration. What you should look at is when you're looking at unified communication, it means let's look at this unified communication as to how does this fit with my CRM tool? Can I do a click to dial? Can I pick up the conversation I had with my customer and not have to do a swivel chair after that, put my notes into the CRM, dispose the ticket, and then go back and close the conversation with the customer and close my contact center. So now I'm doing like 3 or 4 things. That's a really like 1980s way of doing things, right? I don't want my contact center rep or my support person or whoever having to think about all of these applications. I want these things to work together, interoperability being key, right? And I want it to be part of one screen, one experience that the rep goes through, right? So if I'm talking to you, Robin, and you call up and you say, hey, I'm having issues with my, I don't know, my sneakers, right? And I know that you're a customer of my sneaker because Naveed's sneaker is like the best for running, and if you buy Naveed sneakers, they're going to be the best for the trails and all of this other stuff, right? But I have a quality requirement, right? The quality requirement is that your experience with my reps should be immediate, and I should know what the problem is. I should know what your shoe size is. I should know which shoe you bought from me and what kind of things you might be calling me about. So the minute you call me, I should know who you are, when you bought those shoes, what kind of runner you are, because I already know a little bit of that profile. I don't want to have to go through that identification portion. A lot of that should be pre-done. By the time you get to me, I'm solving your problem, right? So you come up and you say, hey, I was on that trail. I did a 2-mile trail and the sole kind of gave way, right? And right away I say, oh, well, sole gave way. That's a quality issue. No problem. We'll fix that problem. The shoe's on its way. Don't worry about returning it. Just donate it somewhere or send it to recycling so that it gets taken care of ecologically, right? And we've resolved that problem. That customer experience for you, if I'm able at that point to know who you are, what you bought, and what you need, and resolve that immediately, right? That's an outstanding experience, because you know what? After that exchange, you're going to be like, you know what? I bought Naveed shoes. Yeah, they had a problem, but they solved it right away and they acknowledged it. And I didn't have to wait on hold for like 35 minutes before I could get the next available representative who was engaged on other calls, and they asked me the same questions. Nah, that experience was so much better, right? Rep, now imagine it on the rep side, right? The rep could be anywhere now, right? Going back to work from anywhere. So the rep could have a software-based contact center on their computer. They could be working at home, right? And in a quiet room or whatever, right? So it's a good environment. And have dealt with the call, disposed of the ticket, got the right information, ran into the supply chain, shipped out the sneaker. Actually, I'll tell you a real incident. Levi's jeans. I went and I couldn't get my Levi's jeans. I'm a big Levi's fan, by the way. And I couldn't get the same color jeans that I buy all the time, right? And I went into the store. We ordered it. I had it 2 days later in my house.
Yeah.
Right. Phenomenal experience. I can't imagine not being able to do these kind of things anymore.
Yeah,
it's the new society.
I mean, so far we know you like Marriott and Levi's. So we got that. But like you're bringing up something that's really interesting. I had a conversation with a CEO,
a huge consumer,
one of our big clients, and you touched on the customer experience. So here's the CEO now who's been, working at home largely, and now he's kind of hybrid. But he mentioned to me, he's like, Rob, now that I've been at home, I see all the various forms of customer experience and customer service, and I want to hold our company up to a whole different level, right? To the point where he was like, why are we paying our customer service people so low? They can work from anywhere, right? We have now, and they're building up on a unified communication stack. So in fact, I think they're actually a customer, which is a good thing. But here's his aha. He's like, Rob, look, we can work from anywhere, but that may not be the right approach. Maybe the right approach is to pay these customer service people more, right? Maybe bring them in more to the culture of the company,
call center,
right? And bring them in, right? Instead of out, right? Give them all the tools you talked about, right? Kind of spread it a little bit more powerful, and turn customer service on its head, so that rather, make it a profession in the company, so that these people are just, absolutely, kind of 100% committed to the brand, the culture of the company. Don't you think, customer experience and customer service really during this pandemic has transformed? It's
100%. 100%. The expectations of things working digitally and customer solutions person, and they're not a customer service rep like they used to be, right? I started out as a customer service rep at Chase Manhattan when I was a little kid, right? Like 19 years old. And that experience was you were on the phone 200 calls a day, and you were knocking people off as soon as possible, because that was your experience, right? Now they're really solutions people. They need to be able to think beyond the problem, right, at hand immediately, but think strategically, what's good for the company, what's good for the customer experience, right? And enabling them and empowering them to make decisions, right, that are good for the customer is huge, right? I'll give you an example. We have a customer social services organization on the East Coast, right? During the pandemic, they had no way of getting calls out to their contact center people at home, because they were sealed at home, right, because of COVID. So what they did is they tried to buy RingCentral for a few of them and just try it out. They tried it for 40 people. Before the end of the year, they were already at 400. Right, which was phenomenal, because what they realized is that, one, the reps could be anywhere, right? Two, they needed the right technology around them. And I don't mean just software. I mean the right headphones, the right video cameras, the right computers, and the right space, green screens, things like that, right? And they had another thing to worry about, which is coming back to what your friend was saying, is that there's an e-discovery risk or a legal risk to what's happening here, right? If you give out your personal number to, for example, doctors making calls back to their patients, they're giving away their personal number. That means that you become, if you're an urgent care center, you become that patient's doctor forever. Right? Yeah. Or God forbid something happens and there's a litigation, there's no way that's now permeating into the person's personal life. So you need an intelligent enterprise solution and an enterprise thought process. And as a CIO, we always think about this, right? Is the enterprise approach to solving the problem so that it's scalable, right? And so turning it on its head, right, a little bit, is that we've now realized that the customer service people are now customer solutions people. And a lot of the basic rudimentary things can be handled by AI. So now what you're doing is you're raising more of the complicated problems to the human, right? And all of the little problems are getting solved at the machine level. And people don't mind chatting with a bot, right? If it solves the problem, because at the end of the day, it's about the outcome, right? And then when you get to the human, you should be able to solve that problem and get a real solution that's been well thought out by a critical thinking person, right? And that's where your friend is headed with turning customer solutioning to over the edge.
Yeah, like taking out that friction is super important, right? And the CEOs, this example, like I don't think we would have had the pandemic, that the CEO would have absorbed so much at home customer experience, right? Where, I mean, it's kind of like my neighbor who gets on Amazon and orders like a little thing of washers, and then instead of going down to Home Depot, right? It's just, and they show up. I mean, it's I don't know if it's lazy or just how much we've turned the corner, just that
we just don't want to leave our house. I feel like we've all become like these what do you call those homebound Homer? What do you call them?
The hermits.
The snail hermit crabs. Yeah, we've all become hermits.
Yeah. Well, do you think that it's made us? And this is another great debate. I love having this one when we do our roundtables, or I'm even talking to my older kids. Do you think all of this has made us more or less productive, or we've just filled in the time differently? I will tell you, on those commutes that I used to have, I would fill it in calling my mom, and my mom now wonders why I never call her, because I'm usually now, like I'm on those 8 in the
Every
morning.
30 minutes.
Yeah,
boom,
just
boom.
boom, boom, boom. I mean, it just goes straight through, right? And so you'd really, I mean, maybe we're not tucking in, phone calls to mom, or, or reading other kinds of material that I would always stack it up, and then kind of read through it, even if I just earmarked it on
Metro North there.
But
right? On the Metro North on the LIRR.
I mean, we've got the tools are fabulous, right? But it doesn't mean that the tool in the hand of the worker is going to make them more productive. People still have to have the intent, I think, of being productive anyway. What are your thoughts around productivity?
No, you're 100% right. So internally, right, it's statistically proven that productivity did increase with people working from home. Unfortunately, though, it did, again, coming back to the anxiety and the isolation and things like that, it also had an impact on their mental health, right? On our mental health in general. So there's a balance, right, between how much productivity and how much culture is so important, right? So this whole return to office is I believe less about productivity than it is about just the need for human beings to be more social, right?
Yeah.
And having those gaps, right? I'll give you an example. I'm an East Coast kid. Like I grew up in Brooklyn. I went to school in Port Washington, Long Island. I graduated in New York City, and with master's degree at Poly. But I mean, the only way they're going to get me out of permanently living in New York is in a box. Okay, that's the only way. So I'm diehard New York, and the way we used to commute is Long Island Railroad or subways or things like that. And you spend a lot of time reading the crossword, being social. And in New York, you're packed with people, right? All the time, there's people. I'm now on the West Coast for about a year now. I'll be here for a year, and on and off. And one of the challenges here is that the culture is driving. So it takes an hour and a half to get to the office, and an hour and a half. Now, I can fill that with podcasts. I can fill that with conference calls. I can fill that with music from, in my car, because the traffic is moving at 25 miles an hour, even though it's at 65 on the side of the highway. So I can do some of these things, and it's a nice little break from the 30-minute calls. But at the same time, I don't have to be in the office every day of the week, because we've adopted a culture of let's do hybrid, come into the office a few days a week, right? And work from home or work from anywhere or work from a client site, whatever. And so there is that balance. Now, this is what's critical for us as we move into the future is how do we bring our teams together, keep them engaged, right? Have them think about the next things that they want to do or we want to be doing as a company, even if it's not their job, right? What was neat about working in the office is you would walk around and you would get ideas that were even outside of your swim lane.
Yeah.
When we're on these back-to-back meetings, we're in our swim lane so tight, so narrow that we don't have time to think about strategy beyond our swim lanes, right? Yeah. Or to even
it's very linear, I think, too, right?
It is very linear. Yeah, very linear. So this return to office is going to allow us to jump these swim lanes and make our company stronger, in my opinion, because not only will you have the quiet days where you can work from anywhere, but then you will also have the days where you can collaborate with people outside of your business unit and get ideas on how you bring synergies from other business units into your organization, right? And leverage those possibilities, right? And it's really about the adjacent possibilities. And I did a talk on this like 3 years ago about adjacent possibilities. We release software, and CIOs know this all the time, is that we release software and we release solutions, but it's our business units that come up with solutions for the use of that software that we didn't even imagine when we pushed it out into the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah,
so I'm hoping for that kind of synergy to come back.
Yeah. Well, one of my observations, I've been lucky enough, I guess, in some ways, since Feb 1. So January, I kind of stayed home, but since Feb 1, I've been keeping track. I've been to 56 different cities, and internationally, domestically, for work, some vacation, but my philosophy, even when I go on vacation, I still tuck in a bunch of meetings. It's what happens when you kind of run your own business, right? But one thing's for sure, like traveling to Europe, traveling down to Mexico, South America, Canada, US, regionalization definitely is different. Our friends here today on the East Coast, if you go up to Boston and Northeast, it's much different than Florida. I've been down to Miami a few times. I got a daughter going to Miami now. There was never any COVID in Miami. I'm assured of that, right? Here in Texas, we were kind of part-time COVID. I grew up in Washington State. My family, my mom's still up there, and I've been to California a lot, and Denver. I mean, I've been all over, right? But it's super interesting. Like here in Austin, it's probably about 70% occupancy in the buildings, office buildings, right? And I was just downtown San Francisco last week, and it's pretty much empty, right? Mexico City 2 weeks before, everybody's back. They're wearing masks still. They're still kind of, masking up, but the streets are full. I'm telling you, Mexico City traffic is full. So the regionalization is probably interesting too, right? So the peanut butter isn't being spread on the bread evenly at all, right? No. And then you see different groups collaborating, kind of at a different pace as well, right? And so it's kind of like, I imagine at some point it's going to be keeping up with the Joneses and the Smiths, right? If they're doing it, we should do it. We may not like it, but that's how you get ahead. Everybody was busted down to private, at the same time when COVID started. And everybody's coming back differently, which is going to, I think, notwithstanding the fantastic tools that you guys are providing to empower us all, right? But don't you think everybody's coming back at a different pace, which is going to create all kinds of different pressure points, I would think, anyway.
Yeah, and this is why enterprise architecture and that cost rationalization and software rationalization is going to be so critical, right? Because we've been spending a lot of money on all of this stuff, right? We're going to need to look at how does that impact security? What is the interoperability between our applications? How do we get the most out of our environment? How many integrations can we get so that they're unique to our industries and to our regional compliance requirements? Now, GDPR in Europe, the forget me capabilities in California with CCPA, and you're going to have those compliances in each of those regions for that software and your environment. At the same time, people said people would leave the office buildings and all these office buildings will be barren, right? I'll tell you that New York City was supposed to be a wasteland, right? After COVID. And if you look at New York City, rents are up 38% this year.
Right.
Right. Why are they up? Because people are coming back to New York City. What we will see is, like with Mayor Eric Adams in New York City, he's requiring New York City government workers to come to the office 9 to 5. He doesn't believe in hybrid. Mm-hmm. Whereas in Utah, right, you're in Provo and places like this, you're seeing people say, you know what, it doesn't matter if you work remote as long as you service our constituents. Mm-hmm. Right. So there's going to be that variation, and just like there's a variation in our political beliefs, there's going to be a variation in how we return to work and what our policies are and things like that. Again, it's not, we don't have enough data over 3 years, just like, we don't have enough data on what's going to happen with all these vaccines that we have in our arms, right? Um,
Mhm.
we don't have enough data as to how we're going to end up as a race, as humanity of 7 billion people across the globe. But we will change. I mean, the world has changed already dramatically. It's going to continue to change. So that's the constant. Uh, but the way we engage, I think, will be beneficial to to the global climate, right? With less flying taking place, though, even though flying is up right now, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, we're going to see more of these video conferences because there's going to be a lot more cost actualization, right? Like, why are we flying to wherever to do a 2 hour meeting? That's silly. Why don't we just do a 2 hour meeting over video, right?
Yeah.
Or why don't we just chat about it right now rather than having a meeting, right? Let's use people's time more sparingly, more respect. I think I'm seeing a lot more respect to people's time now versus, let's just schedule another meeting and we'll just end up in this conference room and we'll talk about nothing and have no agenda or no meeting minutes and
Yeah.
come back with nothing and have another meeting about nothing. I feel like Dilbert, right, in that one. And I think a lot of that Dilbertism is going to get reduced because people are going to be a lot more respectful about each other's time. And they'll be going to be respectful about their geographies, right, because of that.
Mhm.
And travel is going to be more thoughtful, right? Let's look at, for example, like employee engagement. We used to have a lot of like employees in the office, but we wouldn't have a lot of employee social activities, right? To bring team building activities together in the past because it was too costly. Now we're actually being very thoughtful about, let's do a quarterly business review and let's do a team building exercise at that quarterly business review so that people can, let down their hair and have a good time and share their thoughts and learn a little bit about, you know, their French poodle or whatever, or or their pit bull or their kid or whatever it is, or get to know each other. Now we're being a lot more thoughtful about it. I think that's how we're going to change. I think there's a lot of positive that'll come out of it. Obviously, there's a yin and a yang to everything, but I think I'm very hopeful for the future.
Yeah. Well, one thing's for sure, I'm really glad we haven't gotten rid of the cocktail hour, and
I love the cocktail hour.
that's still in full force, remote, virtual, or in person. I'm all for that. And speaking of letting his hair down, I see it. We're rejoined by Amir. So
it's 5 o'clock somewhere. Just wanted to get ahead of that.
So
yeah.
It is. Well, Naveed, thank you so much. It's always, I learned a lot, and it's always great to kind of debate and talk about really the topics at hand for everybody. I mean, it's really what kind of brings us together. Just any quick last comment before we hand it back to Amir for the closeout for today?
No, I mean, the only thing I would leave everyone with is that think about your enterprise not from the fact that you have a bunch of tools, but look at it from how it works cohesively and how your applications coexist so that you have the least amount of friction from a security perspective, an employee experience perspective, a customer experience perspective. And this way, all of this goes to maintenance and operations, where now you can think about the future of innovation and free yourself of the chaos, right? There's always chaos, and I feel like in chaos we can always grow. But sometimes it's just good to take a step back and say, where am I today and where do I want to be? And rationalize. So that's what I want to leave everyone with. I'm very hopeful for humanity.
Great. Well, thank you, Naveed. Thank you so much. Thanks for your thoughts today. And Amir, back to you. Another great event.
Yeah, I don't know. We can end in a better way than saying hope for humanity. I love it. Thank you, Naveed. Obviously, Rob, thanks for helping to lead this discussion. Thank you, RingCentral. Obviously, a leader in connecting humanity. So we're glad to have you guys as the experts on this subject. To everyone else, thank you for spending some time with us. We hope you learned something new and got some different perspectives on things. Thank you all again for joining. We hope to see you again. Thank you, Naveed. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, RingCentral. And to everyone, stay safe out there. We'll see you next time.
Thank you all. Take care.
Cheers.
All right,
Thank you for having me.
Bye.